Now that we've taken a look at some of the focus areas for advocacy, let's take a look at what we can do in terms of those focus areas for going forward. The one focus area was paradigm, the way we look at autism. I gave my own definition of autism as an umbrella term for a specific cluster of neurodevelopmental endophenotypes. But I don't think that I'm the only person that should be listened to in this regard. We need to listen to the experiences of other autistic people and how they frame their own autism, what they think autism is, and put these all together. Why should non-autistic people be defining what autism is? They've chosen to cluster us all together under this one umbrella. So now ask us why we think we ended up there, beyond the diagnostic criteria. Because some of us may lose those. Some of us may change. For some of us, that's not the core of our being, these behaviors, these external things which they use to classify us. We have other things in common. We detect each other somehow, even when we don't know that we share this common label. So that's one thing that we really need to do to understand what autism is. Trying to define autism and trying to decide what to do about autism often goes in the wrong direction because we are isolating autism from actual autistic people. And we're forgetting that we may be autistically human. You're trying to old-fashioned disability approach, the days in which disability was seen as a shameful thing, and yes, we still have that with us together. It's like, oh no, you're not disabled. That's what people will say to me, as if they pay me some kind of a compliment. Well, I may be far less disabled than some of my other autistic friends, but I still have a disability. That's not a shame. So in the past, the legacy that comes with us is that disability is a terrible shame, and therefore we must say that you are a person with a disability, but you are a person separate from your disability. And so even though we hate your disability, that's really awful, you can still be nice. We can't do that always as autistic people. Some of us see autism as very much defining who we are. I certainly do. I see my sex, I'm female, that certainly defines for me some of the ways in which I act and experience the world. My culture, I'm Afrikaans, that's my first home language, and there's a certain Afrikaans culture to go with that. Well, a certain niche of it, because I don't identify very well with all Afrikaans people. But those things are some of the things that define me. But every single cell in my body is an autistic cell in some way. It carries that genetic material. It determines the way I experience the world from a sensory perspective, the way that I think, the way I relate to others, the things I struggle with, the things I do well. These things are defined by my autism to some extent. So to say that I'm a person with autism would be the equivalent of saying that I'm a person with femaleness, if I don't really see that as much of my identity, or a person with Afrikaansness. Other autistic people may see it differently. They may feel, the core of my being is, what I value in the world, and that is a religious concept for them, perhaps. And autism is, for me, not the core of my being, or not a great determinant of who I see myself to be. That's fine. Some people may choose to say, I'm a person with autism. But we do need to see that autistic people should be defining their experience for us. We cannot talk about autism without talking about autistic people. So there may be many ways of looking at autism, knowing it is an umbrella term for many different things in an educational setting. What works for one may not work for the other, but some things will work for many. We need to take a look at what autism is in a work setting, what autism is in a social setting, in a medical setting even. And those are going to mean different kinds of ways of defining it. In all cases, it's still going to be an umbrella term for a specific cluster of phenomena. Okay, so much for paradigm. Secondly, health. What can we do there? Here, I really feel that learning is super important. In 2018, we held the world's first autistic health seminar, which was presented to health professionals to inform them of things. And some of the things that we learned through this process is just how little knowledge there is out there in the medical field about the kinds of things that autistic people struggle with. We knew it was little, but we didn't know it was that little. For example, I asked in the class, I was on my way to explaining sensory overstimulation, and I asked, okay, so doctors in the room, can you tell me, give me the symptoms of magnesium deficiency, of hypomagnesemia. Tell us all that. Okay, and I paused, I looked up, and I realized that the doctors were also going blank. And inside me, I was going like, oh my goodness. Okay, so it's not common knowledge for doctors to be able to identify symptoms of magnesium deficiency. We have a long way to go, but that's okay. We need to go that route. So learning is super important. Read all you can. Read research, but read autistic people's experiences as well, of the kinds of things that have worked well for them. Not always the kinds of things that parents have said that works well for the kid, because they're looking at different measures. We need to bear in mind, for example, that many of my friends have been abused by their parents and are either estranged from them or have very strained relationships with them. That's fortunately not true in my own case. I get on very, very well with my own mother. But so parents reporting things about their children is not necessarily going to be a reflection of what the child is experiencing. So there's a lot of learning to be done, and I don't think that we can stop. Next, communication. Read what non-speaking autistic people have said they want you to do for other people like them. We realize that there are many different reasons why autistic people do not speak, and everybody deserves a right to their own chosen form of communication and forms of communication that work well for them. For some reason, Stephen Hawking was given what he needed. But if you're autistic and you started out this way, we're not trying out the kinds of things which other autistic people who seem to behave in similar ways are saying were helpful to them. And here this absolutely needs to change. We have to read what autistic people say and understand that for a large group of autistic people, apraxia is a big factor, and learning to move bodies better is going to be a key to nuanced communication. That does not take away from the kinds of other types of supports that are necessary for other people who have different problems, or who may have a problem with oral motor apraxia only, and not a problem with movement in the rest of their bodies to such a degree, or who may have things like a Chiari where surgery is going to be necessary. What else is there? Well, when it comes to the United Nations Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities, we may congratulate ourselves on how nice we are to autistic people, but it doesn't actually fully go to where the CRPD is taking us until we understand what representation means in terms of the CRPD. Now, here, it was in 2018, annually there's a committee for this convention that meets and discusses any new stuff that's come up. In 2018, it was led for the first time by somebody with an intellectual disability, and he chaired it. And the committee put together a paper afterwards to say, here are some things we need to clarify, because people are not getting this. Okay, they're not understanding what representation means. When we say we need to be represented in society, what's often happening is people are putting together organizations and saying, well, this is an autism organization, here's Autism Speaks, here's, autism organizations. And, we care so much about autistic people and their rights. Yeah, maybe you think you do. How it works. Okay, this is how it works according to the CRPD. If you want to call yourself a representative organization, I represent the interests of autistic people, or my organization does, then you need to have at least 50% of your board being actual autistic people. So let's think about this for a moment. Let's say you do that. Let's say you've got a small organization and you represent the autistic people in your city. You're the representatives for, let's say, Cape Town's autistic people. And you have 10 board members. So you would need to have, according to the CRPD, at least 5 autistic people. But let's say all the autistic people that you pick are the ones that are easy for you to talk to. People like Tanya, So Tanya and all her other white friends who can speak with ease, but who happen to have an autism diagnosis and who are very articulate and who can drive a car. Is that representative, considering that the majority of autistic people are not all like me? And that there's a lot of people who actually do not have speech. If we want a representative organization of autistic people, we need a variety of autistic people in leading and decision-making roles. This is very important. In leading and decision-making roles. Not the token person who gets popped onto there, we can do our checkbox. Now, does that mean that organizations led, for example, by parents are a bad thing? No, you could even have an organization of autism therapists or something like that. That's fine, as long as they realize that they are not representing autistic views, that it is still their role and their duty to support autistic-led organizations or to help with the establishment of such organizations where they don't exist. In my own country, there currently isn't such a thing. And the United Nations even recognize that informal or smaller clusterings of people in the absence of formal organizations also count as in some ways representative. So yeah, I have some autistic friends. We operate loosely associated under the Autistic Strategies Network. We might count like that, but we're still not actually what the CRPD envisages. Support for actual autistic representation, therefore, is very important. How do we work towards this? Well, one of the ways that I think is the most powerful is if we all start to study the CRPD and start reading some of it. This is a project that I'm working on as well, to just take everything section by section and to start making pages about those and explaining them. That's not really very hard to understand. The other thing that is super helpful is for us to start understanding the concept of ableism, also known as disableism. And here, disability rights activists across the board who are not necessarily autistic can be very helpful. And I would actually prefer that they be intersectional activists. What do I mean by that? This is a term coined by Black women in America. They would call themselves intersectional feminists because they said that there were multiple oppressions that they actually struggled with. They were oppressed as people because they were Black, because it's a minority and white people dominate. And yes, to a great degree we still have white privilege in countries like mine, where in South Africa, where white people are a minority. But okay, so as Black women, they struggle with being Black and get oppressed because of that. They struggle being oppressed because they're women. And then if they are disabled as well, then they are Black and disabled and they're women. So you can't just advocate for your rights as a Black person or as a woman. You need to actually take a look at these things together. That is going to help us to stop just having voices like mine out here. White privilege, okay, so female, maybe that puts me a little bit down, but yeah, it can't just be people like me talking. We need to understand ableism in all of its forms. We need to understand that things like disability porn, what I mean by that is a kind of term, or in fact, let's call it inspiration porn rather, which is a specific subtype of it. Stella Young, a great disability rights activist who has unfortunately now died, she coined this term. This is where people take the kicks out of saying like, oh wow, but you do so nicely in spite of your disability. You're still like really, really worthy. And your suffering actually tells me why my life is so great because I don't have your problems. I should be so grateful. What? I have a disabled friend. She's visibly disformed in her body. She's a little person, and you can see that she's disabled. With me, you might not be able to see that, okay? So she's really visibly disabled. People have dead straight said to her things like, oh my goodness, if I had your problem, I'd just kill myself. And then they say that it's the autistic people who don't have the social skills. When you tell somebody that if I had your problem, I'd kill myself, what does that say about like the value of your life, or like, you're so horrible, you're so gross? That's what you're saying. Okay, so that's ableism. That's one of many forms of ableism. Talking to people like they're babies is ableism. Just going, it's almost as if there's a template which people use when they write a story about disability in the media. Autism does not stop her from achieving these great things. I have turned down so many media interviews and everything because they wanted to write that kind of story about me. I don't do disability, that nonsense. I will talk about my disability, but I'm not going to do the, inspiration porn. What else? Many autistic people themselves and many other disabled people experience internalized ableism. They take all this stuff and then that becomes part of their being and the way in which they experience the world. So that could turn into kind of collapsing and thinking that my only role in society is to be quite, behave myself nicely, give talks to everybody about how they can also overcome their problems, because I'm autistic and so I can do this, and if I can do it, then so can you. Okay. Yeah, right. And that's not to say that you can do things which inspire people, but please don't use that like angle. Some of the other things that happen is there's a certain self-loathing that comes into some people, and it turns them into horrible people. Seriously, they will try to be more uppity than like, well, at least I'm not disabled as that, disrespect towards other disabled people. What else is there? There's even a type of toxic masculinity which comes out there where some disabled men, because they feel themselves to be lesser than other men, although they're not lesser than other men, but they become lesser than moral in that feeling because they become so angry in themselves that they just want to dominate women, that they just want to silence them, that they speak to them in horrible ways because they think that this is going to bring out their bravado and their masculinity. It's internalized ableism. So if we don't understand ableism, if we don't understand how very, very pervasive it is, and it's very hard for us to usually see it in the same manner that it is hard for us to have seen something like racism 100 years ago when, in my language, I'm pretty sure that there wasn't even a word like that. Because it was just so part of our culture. And it remains there, but at least now we can label the thing. At least now we can identify what racist attitudes are, what racist language is, what racist behavior is. And we can recognize, and I can say as somebody born in the mid-60s in South Africa, in apartheid South Africa, that when somebody accuses me of some form of racism, I have to listen, I have to say, well, you have a point there, yes, I can see that. Thank you for pointing that out. I'm sorry about that. And I will advocate for that to be changed. In the same way, now that we have words for these things in an area like racism, we need to also have words. And I don't want to mean to compare that the struggles that people have as a result of racism are the same as the struggles that I will have as a result of disability. It's not that it equates that or anything. It's not a comparable struggle, but it is something for which there is vocabulary now. So similarly, there needs to be vocabulary, there needs to be understanding of ableism. There isn't even a word for this in my language, Afrikaans, at the moment. I spoke to one of the heads of the dictionary. He says he doesn't think there's a need for a word like that. Oh my goodness, so you can see it, it's stuck in our society. So let us take a look at the principle of nothing about us without us, respect for all, which is embodied in the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities. Let us understand clearly what ableism is, and let us decide to become anti-ableist so that we can support a better paradigm of autism that better supports autistic people and the people and their families and the society in which they live. Let us take this principle of nothing about us without us so that we listen to autistic people's health problems, that we listen to the health problems of their families, which are often ignored, misunderstood, or oversimplified. Let's particularly read the words of non-speaking autistic people. Whereas some may have intellectual disabilities and may not communicate in words or be capable of that, many of those who have been given the means can provide us with a lot of clues of what is necessary for respect towards non-speakers and towards those who have other complex communication needs. Let's stick to human rights.